around and say who we are. And if you want to say a bit more, feel free. So I'll start. So I'm Breda and I'm the communications manager at SIA. And yeah, I support all different teams within the charity. And I haven't actually been on a cafe for a little while because my colleague's been helping, so it's nice to be back and to see people. So yes, that's me. So I'm going to go to my top right hand corner. Dave, over to you.
Good afternoon all, I'm Dave Barker, I'm the campaigns manager at SIA. I have a spinal cord injury at T10 and prior to doing the campaigns manager role, I was doing vocational support for SIA for about 2 or 3 years. And that's me.
Fabulous, thank you. Passan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm Passan Kularatne and I work for Willpower as the head of sport and physical activity. So I'm joining the cafe just to answer any questions and also to promote anything also for my own knowledge as well. I'm learning a lot of new things by joining these cafes. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And you have to forgive me, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name.
I'm Zai Neal.
Zai, is that how you pronounce your first name?
Zai, Z-I.
Lovely, thank you.
I'm one of the SIA lifelong members. I've been paralysed 62 years this year. I'm a C5-6 incomplete, C7 T1 complete, and I've been around a long time, involved on and off with yeah, the spinally injured world, Paralympian. Yeah, I've done it. I suppose the only claim to claim is that I'm most probably one of the very few people alive now that Papa Gutman was their consultant.
Gosh, very, very rare.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm one of the longest lived spinally injured in the world.
Gosh.
I was injured at just under a year.
Well, thank you for coming here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And Debbie?
Yes, I'm Debbie Green and I'm one of the nurses that works for SIA.
Perfect, thanks Debbie. Brilliant. So we have obviously Jane. I'll allow you to introduce yourself, so, but I'll just go through what we'll do. Obviously we'll have a Q&A. Jane is our guest today and she's from Evenbreak. I'll let her explain what Evenbreak is and what she does, and then we'll do have a quiz afterwards for those who want to do it. So I'll do the Q&A now with Jane. So if you can introduce yourself to the group and yeah, talk about how Evenbreak came about.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me here, everyone. Great to see you. So yeah, I'm Jane Hatton and I founded Evenbreak in 2011. Prior to that, I was interested in diversity generally across its broadest field, you know, looking at race and gender and disability, the whole kind of thing. And when I was talking to employers about disability particularly, I'd get 2 reactions from them. So one would be, why would I want to employ a disabled person? They might not have said those exact words, but you knew what they meant. Or it would be, actually, we recognise that this is a pool of talent we should be tapping into, but we don't know how to do that and disabled people never apply. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, that's bad, somebody ought to do something about that. And then I became disabled, also with a spinal condition which affects both my lumbar spine and my cervical spine, and so I have problems with my left hand and arm and chronic pain, but no paralysis, thankfully. And so I decided if no one else was doing anything about it, perhaps I should. So I set up Evenbreak, which is it's a not-for-profit job board just for disabled people who are looking for work, and for those enlightened companies who recognise that this is a pool of talent they should be tapping into. And I decided at the time that I set it up that I would only want to employ people who had lived experience of disability within the team, so that we would know what the barriers are that candidates face. And so that was in 2011, and we've grown quite a bit since then. So there was just me in my front room, you know, with a computer then. And now there are 12 of us, but most are part-time, and we all work remotely from home. And we work with a whole range of different employers on the job board. So Channel 4, John Lewis, Heathrow Airport, you know, all sorts of random employers in different sectors. And our mission really is to make the world of work as accessible to us disabled people as it is to everybody else. So we have the same opportunities to thrive there. We recognise that the barriers are usually on the employer's side in terms of, you know, inaccessible recruitment processes or buildings or information or communication, whatever it might be. So we try and work with employers to help them become more accessible and inclusive, alongside the job board, which obviously is there for disabled job seekers to find jobs. And the way it works is that candidates say to us, if they can see that an employer has paid to advertise a job on a job board that's just for disabled people, then they've got confidence that that employer is serious about this and will take them seriously, rather than just, you know, a strapline that says we're an equal opportunities employer, which, as we all know, very few actually are, certainly when it comes to disability. So that's kind of how we came about, and how we've grown since then.
Brilliant. And could you talk us through the process? So what somebody like a candidate would go through once from the start of getting in touch with you?
Yeah, so we're not an agency, so what we don't do is get jobs for people. And sometimes we do have candidates who say, you know, I've got this condition, can you get me a job? And life is never quite that simple, and employers want candidates to, you know, take the initiative and get the job themselves. So what happens with us is that a candidate will register on the job board, and that means that you can search jobs, you can set up alerts, so that if you want a particular job in a particular area, you can set up an alert so that you'll know when that particular kind of job comes up. And if a job comes up that you like the look of, you can apply for it, but you'll apply directly to the employer rather than through us. So we don't do the hand-holding that a lot of charities do and social enterprises do, but we do offer online support. So we have resources for candidates which have sort of static resources that are things like how to account for gaps in a CV, how to ask for adjustments, how to talk about disability in a positive way to an employer. So it's not, poor me, I'm employed, I'm disabled, please give me a job. It's more, you know, I've got all these abilities, please give me a job. So it's much more positive. And we have some vlogs. One of our team that lives up in Glasgow, actually, she has done a number of video blogs about various things like, you know, starting a business, how to get access to work funding, you know, interview techniques, asking for adjustments, all those kinds of things as well. So we try and give online advice. Where people need more hands-on support than we're able to offer, because there are only a few of us and we're kind of dotted around the country, we have a signposting page for other organisations who do offer hands-on support. So if someone needs help with writing a CV or confidence building or whatever it might be, we can signpost candidates to those employers, those organisations who will be able to give them that kind of support that we can't.
Brilliant, that's great. And do you think more companies are becoming more proactive in ensuring that they are inclusive, or do you still think that we've got some way to go? Obviously, as you say, you've been having started nearly 10 years ago. What have you seen a difference?
I've seen a change. It's very, very slow. I think if, say, 20 years ago, I'd have said to an employer, what are you doing around diversity? they would probably have looked at me as though I was from another planet and said, we're a business, why would we be interested in diversity? By the time Evenbreak started, diversity was becoming more of a thing. But still, if I talked to employers about diversity, they would then say what they were doing on race, maybe what they were doing on gender. If I was really lucky, what they were doing on LGBTQ+. And then I'd say, yeah, what about disability? And it would be, yeah, well, we might look at that next year. It was always kind of the poor relation. And it still is. I mean, 9 years on, it still is the poor relation, but it's a little bit higher up the agenda than it was, which is, you know, at least it's on the agenda now, which it didn't appear to be all those years ago. So I think more organisations, certainly before COVID, were beginning to realise that they needed talent in all shapes and sizes, and that actually employing disabled people wasn't about charity, it was about talent. But they were still few and far between. So I think we have a very, very long way to go, and we still have to talk to employers quite often about their approach to employing disabled people. And often they'll say, oh yeah, we'll put you in touch with corporate social responsibility. And we'll say, but this has nothing to do with CSR. This is about talent. This is about you getting the skills in your organisation that you need. It's not about you doing a good deed. It's about you finding the people that you need. So we're still having to have that, you know, sickening conversation with people, even in 2020. But at least we were having a conversation, which is, you know, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, obviously, with the Black Lives Movement and going forward, like awareness of more minority groups that have been overlooked. It'll be just interesting to see what impact that might have had to make people look beyond just...
It seems to be a kind of, it's a weird thing, because you can't put people in boxes, can you? Because we're all in different boxes. So, for example, if Passan was to be discriminated against, you won't know whether it's because of your skin colour or your disability, and it doesn't matter. You've been discriminated against. So, you know, we don't all sit comfortably in one box and not in any other box. And I think society still sees us in boxes. And, you know, sometimes employers will say, oh, we're doing race this year, we're doing women next year, and we're doing something else the year after. And then you think, if you're a black woman, which of those years do you fit into? You know, it's about the whole intersectionality, isn't it? And so really what we try to say is, if you're looking at inclusion, then you have to be inclusive. Inclusion doesn't just mean skin colour, or just mean, a couple of years ago when it became mandatory to do gender pay gap reporting, everybody was focusing on gender. But actually women will still have a race and ethnicity, they'll still have a disability if they're disabled, they'll still have a sexual orientation. You know, it's difficult to silo people like that. And what we try to say to people is, that's not how it works. How it works is you need to be inclusive for everybody. And I'm obviously biased, but my view is, if you can get it right for disabled people, you're a long way towards getting it right for everybody else as well. Because with most of the kind of protected characteristics, you know, skin colour, gender, whatever, most of it's about attitude, isn't it? It's about, you know, Black Lives Matter is about us saying Black lives are every bit as important as everybody else's lives. And lost my train of thought, but it, you know, for me, it's about, we're all intersectional. And if we get it right for disabled people, it's not just about perception, it's also about other barriers, you know, building inaccessibility, for example. So physical barriers as well as attitudinal barriers. So I think if we can sort of get it right for people who are different in physical or cognitive or sensory ways from other people, then it's going to be much easier to get it right for all the other characteristics as well. So when we work with disabled people, we're very keen to ensure that we're working for all disabled people, you know, people from different ethnicities, different genders, different ages, different accents, different areas of the country, because you can't just focus on one characteristic of somebody. We're all made up of different characteristics. So Black Lives Matter is, you know, I'm so glad that race is back on the agenda, and it so needs to be. And, you know, it's sort of fallen off the agenda, or people seem to think, oh, we've got that sorted now. And we're so far away from getting it sorted that it's really important that Black Lives Matter is back on the agenda and back being talked about. And and people are engaging with it, but it needs to be done not at the expense of all the other characteristics. It needs to be part of, yes, everybody's life matters, including Black lives, disabled lives, female lives, gay lives, you know, whatever it might be, and trying to get that Black Lives Matter message across, which is about saying what Black Lives Matter really means is everybody's lives matter equally. And if you just say everyone's life matter, then you naturally exclude Black lives and female lives and disabled lives. So it's actually trying to say, let's get all of those characteristics in the conversation. I don't think we're there yet, but we're working hard to try and get there.
Yeah, no, I think, well, everything that's come out of it in recent weeks and months shows, as you say, we do have still a long way to go. But hopefully it's given people and organisations a chance to look at themselves and reflect on their practices to make
the agenda, and people are talking about it, which is great, because we're never going to get anywhere until people do start looking in the mirror and saying, we're not doing this well, we need to do something better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do you think, obviously you touched on coronavirus, do you think obviously the current economic situation, have you noticed any difference in terms of the level of companies coming to you with applications? Has it quietened down at all, or?
It's a funny one. It's immediately the reaction was, and I don't think it was anything to do with disability, it was to do with the economy, was that most of our employers just stopped advertising jobs because, you know, they were either laying people off or furloughing people. They certainly weren't in a position to be recruiting. So obviously the jobs, so we used to have between 2,000 or 3,000 jobs on the board at any one time. Now it's between 500 and 600. So it was a huge drop in the number of jobs that were being advertised. And also, of course, in our income, because the two things are related. And also on the negative side, there is a positive side, but on the negative side, I think there was, you know, there's a fear that even for those organisations that were beginning to look at diversity and inclusion more seriously, that it's still almost seen as a luxury. So it's one of those things that we do in times where everything's really well and really good and full employment, we can afford the energy to look at diversity. But actually, when there's a crisis, we've got to kind of, you know, hunker down, and those things are just a luxury then, and we've got to get on with it. So I think there is a concern that in a time of mass unemployment, which is likely to be, you know, the immediate future, if not, you know, more long term, disabled people and people who were previously excluded from the job market will be at the bottom of the pile again. So that's the bad news. But I think there's some silver linings, and one of the obvious ones is that disabled people have been asking employers forever if they can do their jobs from home. And forever employers have been saying, no, not possible, can't do that job from home, can't be done, can't possibly be done, too difficult. And of course, now we know that almost all jobs, obviously frontline workers can't. You can't be a nurse working from home or a teacher. Well, you can. I mean, teachers have been working from home, haven't they? But an awful lot of jobs can be done from home, at least, you know, a large part of it. So I think the fact that the general population now are seeing that home working isn't something that's bizarre and impossible and hard to do, and actually people who work from home are usually more productive than people who work in the office, then if it becomes more commonplace, then it's going to be much easier now for disabled people to say, I can do that job, but I need to do it from home. Excuse me. So, so that's definitely a silver lining. And I mean, you know, making the point that not every disabled person wants to work from home, because for lots of people, they like to go in the office and, you know, socialise with other people. It's part of the daily routine. So we shouldn't say, well, people can work from home, so we don't need to make the offices accessible. Yes, we do need to make the offices accessible. But it does give another option for people, and not just for disabled people, but for people generally, which is good. And I think the message that we're now giving out, before COVID, we were definitely promoting the business case for employing disabled people. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called A Dozen Brilliant Reasons to Employ Disabled People. And it's very much about the bottom line business case. So it's not about, oh, it's a shame, feel sorry for us. It's about disabled people are every bit as productive on average as non-disabled people. We tend to stay in our jobs longer. We tend to go off sick less. We have additional skills we bring with us, like being a bit more resilient, maybe problem solvers, creative thinkers. You know, for someone who's disabled, going for a trip into the town is far more complicated than for non-disabled people. So you've got to think about the transport. Is the transport accessible? If you're driving, is there going to be a accessible parking space there? Is the venue going to be accessible? Will there be an accessible, you know, it has to be planned like a military activity. And so whether we want to or not, we have to develop those skills of planning, project managing, you know, if we have personal assistance, you know, budgeting, employing people, creative problem solving, finding different ways of doing things. And so that was kind of the message we were giving to employers, was you need to be employing disabled people because we bring all of this extra stuff with us. Now, so we were talking about skill shortages and they were talking about skill shortages and we were saying, but we've got candidates who have those skills. Now that's a harder argument to have, because if there's going to be mass unemployment, most employers will say, we're not short of skills. There's enough people out there that we want to employ. Why would we bother with disabled people? So although the message we were giving then is still true, the message that we're now saying, which I think it resonates more with employers, is look, you know, since this crisis, the world of work has changed. It may never go back to how it was before. You know, it was very traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in an office or at a site kind of way of working before. We may never get back to that. There'll still be some people working those patterns, but I think we're much more open now to people working different hours, people job sharing, people working part-time, people working at weekends and evenings, not necessarily 9 to 5, somebody working 20 hours instead of 37, remote working from home, and also doing things differently, finding different ways of doing things. And really what we're saying is that the absolute masters at all of those things are disabled people, because we've been doing it forever. You know, we've been doing things in different ways to other people. We've been challenging the status quo. We've been working from home. We've been working in ways that nobody's thought of. We've had to come up with ways of doing things nobody else has. So actually, if you need a flexible and adaptive workforce, what you really need to do is employ disabled people. So that messaging has changed. And I think that's beginning to resonate with people now, that they're beginning to see, actually, yes, we do want people who don't say, we've always done it this way. We want people who can say, there's a new and better way of doing things now. Let's do it that way instead. And so those are the two silver linings, I think, that actually come out of what's been an absolutely horrible, you know, pandemic for everybody, and particularly for disabled people, because we are, you know, along with BAME communities, disproportionately affected by the crisis. But I do think that we need to grab hold of the silver linings and actually make sure that we remind employers of all that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then in terms of disabled people themselves, if they, for example, haven't been in the job market for a while, or, you know, they're looking to return, or maybe if they've been made redundant, do you have any like top tips or advice that you would give someone? As you obviously said, it's going to be that bit more challenging now due to mass unemployment.
Yeah, I think for me, it's very much about the approach that people take when they're looking for work. So, you know, we talk to candidates all the time, and sometimes their approach is to say to an employer, look, I haven't worked for a long time. I know nobody really wants to employ me. Please give me a chance. And to be honest, as an employer, I wouldn't be very enthused by that, because actually what I want are the best people. I want people who are enthusiastic and competent and good at what they do. So my advice has always been to disabled candidates, you know your worth. You are a premium candidate, because you do go with all these, you know, as disabled people, we're just people. We have the same diversity of skills and qualities as everybody else in the population, but we do bring those additional things. We do bring those project management and problem solving and creative thinking skills with us as well. So we as candidates need to know that, so that we can go to an employer and say, hey, you know, I wouldn't have applied for this job if I didn't have the skills that you're looking for. Yes, I do have those, but actually also I'm autistic, and so that means I can be better at X, Y, and Z than other people. Or I'm a wheelchair user, which means I'm really good at project managing and creative thinking. So it's not about saying, poor me, I'm disabled, give me a chance. It's about, lucky you, I'm disabled and I've decided to come and, you know, go for a job at your place. So I'm not saying you'd say it in those words, but actually the whole approach needs to be, I'm a premium candidate and you should really look at my skills, because actually any adjustments I might need are going to be very simple. Could be that I work from home, could be flexible working hours. If it's more complicated, access to work will sort it out. So don't worry about adjustments, just look at the skills I'm going to bring with me, and have that kind of really positive approach rather than an apologetic, please give me a chance because nobody else has. I don't know if that helps.
No, I think that's really powerful, because just that change of perspective, and as you say, positioning yourself as a candidate and your skill set and everything you can bring to a role, changing it and framing it in that way completely makes a difference. You know, makes an application and like an interview process that more powerful. And I think if, you know, people have the confidence in themselves to talk about themselves like that and to acknowledge, as you say, they've got so much to bring.
That one of the things that we're trying to do, and really, you know, obviously social model of disability, what we're trying to do is change the employers, because at the moment there's still a kind of disabled people need to fit in with us rather than we need to adapt. And what we're really saying to employers, we did another book, what I wrote, as a way to recruit disabled people, is about saying things like, you know, CVs, really, they're not that great a way of selecting candidates, because they'll only show historic information. So they'll only show what someone has done, not what they have the capacity to do. And they'll only really show what people have had the opportunity to be able to do. So if as disabled people we've been discriminated against in the past, we won't have had the job opportunities to be able to demonstrate that we have some of the skills that this employer might need. So rather than an employer looking at what's your work history, what they should be looking at is, what are your strengths? And do you have the strengths that are needed to do this job? It doesn't matter whether you haven't worked for 10 years or whether you've had 47 jobs in the last 3 years, or whether you've not worked in this particular industry before. Do you have the strengths and the transferable skills that we need for this role? The CV becomes irrelevant. So what we're really trying to say is, look at your recruitment processes and make them more accessible. Even interviews, I don't think are great. You know, I don't think any of us perform at our best when we've got a panel of 5 people firing questions at you. Some people do, some people are great at blagging at interviews, but I think that interviews really only show us who are the best people at blagging at interviews, not who are the best people for the job. So what we're really trying to say to employers is, when you're recruiting, you know, look for the skills that you need, and if they're transferable, then that's fine, and then test them in a way that's relevant. So if you want someone to be a coder, test them in coding. Don't ask them in an interview how good they are at coding, so that people can actually demonstrate, you know, what it is that they can do. But we're not there yet. So, you know, most employers still use CVs, still use interviews. So I think that, you know, in that climate, we have to be aware of making sure that the CVs and our response interviews are very positive, not necessarily hiding our disability, but turning it into a positive rather than a poor me, look at me, it's a shame.
Absolutely. And as you're talking, have you ever found any sectors are better than others, or are more advanced than others in terms of ensuring that they're inclusive and diverse?
Some that are way behind, like say construction. I mean, there are a few like HS2 are really good in this field, and they obviously work with a lot of construction companies, but construction isn't great yet. Bizarrely, the one that we now can't really use very much, hospitality, tend to be quite good at employing disabled people. And we had a big campaign all set, ready to go just before the lockdown. And of course, hospitality now is, you know, not the organisation, the sector you'd want to work in. And also retail are usually quite good, and also they're struggling. So, but I think now that some of the key worker roles, so for example, care workers who, you know, there's a funny thing about the social and healthcare sector. When you talk to them about employing disabled people, it kind of, they look at disabled people as patients or service users, not as colleagues. And we're having to kind of change that now. But I do think that they're beginning to realise that actually there is a huge place in healthcare and social care for disabled people to, you know, make a great contribution. So I'm hoping that that sector will open up. But it's always been, yeah, but we look after disabled people. Yeah, you do. But actually, there are lots of disabled people who can look after others as well. You know, it's not on us and them. It's a kind of us. So I think that's quite a good one. And oddly, financial services, for some reason I can't really explain, maybe they recognise that they needed the skills. They seem to be pretty good in this area. So some of the banks and insurance companies and building societies, they seem to be a little bit more forward than others. But it's a slog in all of the sectors with most employees, if I'm honest.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting to hear that. Well, Jane, you've gone through all my questions and more. I wanted to ask if anybody else, so Zai, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I've got loads. Sorry. First, I need to make a statement as well. First of all, as a Black disabled woman, I have to challenge you in terms of aligning it all up with Black Lives Matter, and because I think it's great you're having the conversation, but actually some of in the disabled world, the people who are really on the bottom of the pile are actually Black disabled people. They're actually, because not only are they're suffering the double discrimination. So I think that needs to be. But one of the questions I actually had is, now I've worked all my life, and I've worked in the 60s, sorry, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I'd actually say that today, even though we've been through equal opportunities, we are so far behind. 2012 did absolutely nothing for people with disabilities. Actually, I think it put the whole thing back, because I think our society is in terms of disability is absolutely disgraceful. Just the general society forgetting, you know. But one of the things that tends to happen to a lot of disabled people, and I wanted to know whether you have a policy on this, is that what companies are very good at doing is employing disabled people, and then what actually they're doing is they're employing them on a short-term contract to make it look. And so does your company have a policy where you actually don't put on your board companies that are doing that, because that's just the way that they can say, oh look, this is what we do?
Yeah, the jobs that are advertised on Evenbreak are jobs that are advertised elsewhere. So it's not that. What we say to employers is, don't just cherry pick jobs that you think, you know, you have this ridiculous conversation and they say, what kind of jobs can disabled people do?
Yeah, I know that, because I've been there. I was
ridiculous,
you know,
isn't it?
Yeah, I was, you know, in terms of healthcare and stuff. I was a social worker in child protection, out in the field, working in, you know, not doing it from the office,
yeah,
but doing it actually out in the field, going and doing home visits. It was me getting my social work job. I set up the mobility officer, which actually was taken. My local authority dealt with it really badly, but other local authorities, so that was supporting somebody in social work or whatever to do their job out and about, and that was taken on board. So you know, I have concerns, having done it myself.
Yeah,
have concerns about having disabled people working from home,
yeah,
because
no,
one of the things about, you know, I think in employment is that it gives you a social life, it gives you people, and then, you know, and I can see employers loving keeping disabled people working from home and isolating them.
Yeah. I mean, what we say to employers is, don't cherry pick the jobs you put on Evenbreak, you put them all on there. And so if you look on Evenbreak, pretty much all of the jobs are permanent. Actually, when we started, they were all permanent and full-time, which I wasn't happy about, because not everybody wants to work part-time. And for me, it's about choice. So I don't think there should be an assumption that every disabled person wants to work from home, because as you say, that's certainly not the case. But it should be an option for everybody, disabled or otherwise. So if there are people who really want to, you know, they'd be great working in a particular job in an office, and the transport isn't accessible and the building isn't accessible, that's not an excuse for not employing somebody. You should make both of those things accessible, but also you shouldn't reject that person because the infrastructure isn't there. So for me, working from home should be an option that people can choose if it suits them to do so, not something that's chosen by the employer, something that's chosen by the candidate themselves. Most of the jobs on our board now are permanent. We do offer volunteer roles because there are some disabled people who haven't worked for a long time who would rather do volunteer roles first and then move into a paid role. But we have few of those because I didn't want the board to be swamped with volunteer roles, because I also know of disabled people who've jumped from one volunteer role to another, and they've done unpaid work experience and they've got a CV as long as your arm but still haven't been paid for any of it.
Yeah, and the voluntary sector love it.
Yeah.
They, you know, the voluntary sector use and abuse disabled people, because what they do is they have them doing volunteering, which enables them to stay on benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a policy at Evenbreak that we don't use volunteers at all. So, you know, if a job needs doing, it needs to be paid for, and it needs to be paid for above the living wage, you know, the proper living wage, not the government living wage. But I agree with you when you say that actually in some ways we've gone backwards, because I think that the Paralympics did us no favours, because it was, those disabled people can break world records and you can't even get a job. You know, it was that kind of negative dialogue that we got into. But also, I think with the effects of austerity over the last 10 years, and I don't want to get political particularly, but I do think a result of austerity has been that disabled people have been demonised. You know, we've been portrayed as work-shy benefit scroungers. And as an employer, why would you want to employ a work-shy benefit scrounger? I haven't met any. I'm sure there are some somewhere. I've never met anybody. All of the disabled people who use Evenbreak use it because they want to work. They want to contribute. They want to get a job. They're desperate to work. And not, you know, yes, for money, but not just for money, for all the reasons that everybody else wants to work. And but I do think that we've gone backwards in terms of how disabled people are portrayed in the media to a certain extent. So we're either poor charitable objects of pity, or we're work-shy benefit scroungers, or we're superhero Paralympians. Well, I don't know about you, but you know, none of the disabled people I know fit any of those three stereotypes. We're just ordinary people getting on with our lives. You know, we're not remarkable, we're not inspirational. We're just doing what we do. And, you know, we're getting better in that we've got, you know, a couple of characters in soap operas and things, you know, and we've got The Last Leg, but it's all still a bit tokenistic, and we still aren't there in terms of being portrayed as within society as we should be. So I think we have gone backwards in some ways and maybe forwards in others, but austerity didn't do us any favours, and I don't think the Paralympics did either.
And COVID hasn't done us any favours, because, you know, we've got the government that are talking about disabled people being vulnerable. Yeah. I'm quite political. I'm involved in a political party, and I am constantly pulling people up with saying, please stop using this word vulnerable. Yeah. I am not vulnerable. No, I have vulnerabilities like you do, but I am not vulnerable. Yeah. And so I think I actually think we've got some really hard times coming ahead, in terms of certainly in terms of employment. Yeah. But we've always had them, and actually I don't, as I say, I think it was so much easier, from my experience anyway, to get work in the kind of 90s, 80s. It was a battle, and you had to prove yourself, but actually you could do it. I'm not sure that you can actually do it, but I'd also like to, you mentioned something about the retail sector, because I'd like to highlight something, that what you don't see in employment is you don't see many people who are wheelchair users in employment. No. And so, you know, in the hospitality, from what I have seen, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the hospitality and retail love the person with learning disabilities.
Yes, Down syndrome is a particular favourite. Yeah,
I'm going to use the wider umbrella.
Yeah.
But we're not, you're not seeing people in retail, working on the tills in Sainsbury's or whatever, You're not seeing those people. I think the last time I saw somebody in a wheelchair working in retail was maybe 9 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think with retail, it's interesting. I remember having a conversation with a fairly unenlightened HR person with I won't say which it was, a chain of supermarkets, about what we do. And they said, oh, no, we don't need you because we employ lots of disabled people. And I said, well, that's great. Where? What are they doing? Oh, we have lots of people with learning disabilities unpacking boxes in the warehouse. So I said, well, that's great. Keep doing that. But what about your buyers? What about your HR people? What about your marketing people? What about your IT department? And there was a kind of, oh, disabled people can do jobs like that. And I think we're getting better in that. I think behind the scenes, we're seeing more disabled people getting work in retail. Well, we were, whether we will now, I don't know. I mean, John Lewis, who also have Waitrose, are clients of ours, and they have disabled people working both sort of front of house in the stores, but also in more, support roles behind the scenes, whether they're admin people or managers or in the HR team itself or whoever it might be. So it is, some are better than others, definitely. But you're right, you don't see many visibly disabled people in retail, on the shop floor, unless it's someone with learning disabilities. You don't see blind people, or deaf people very much either.
Sorry, is that all right, Breda?
Yeah, I was going to say, did you have any more questions?
Yeah, I do actually. Sorry.
Okay.
In terms of, the voluntary sector, and the disabled organisations voluntary sector.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to use Scope as an example, which if anybody doesn't know what Scope is the organisation that's for people with spinal bifida. I mean, the head, I have concerns, and I actually have concerns within our own organisation, is that when we started, we were an organisation that the top people were spinally injured, very visibly spinally injured, and that's lessening. A lot of our staff are getting, I've watched it over the years, the number of staff that are physically disabled, but Scope and organisations like Scope and Mind and whatever, they're not being headed by people that they're meant to be
representing, supporting.
That's the word, yeah. And I'd like to see.
Yeah, we work with Leonard Cheshire, and yeah, I know, I have similar feelings, but they are now their CEO is now a disabled guy, but a blind guy, who is beginning to change, what they do internally, and, not before time really. And some of but I agree, I think he's the only one I can think of that has a CEO who actually has a disability. And yeah, I agree that it's, some of them now have boards of directors or trustees who have disabled people on them.
They're not paid, are they?
But they're not paid, and it's not, and they don't always have that much influence, and they don't always have the information that they might need. It's why we at Evenbreak only employ disabled people, because we are pan disability. For our internal intelligence, we need people with different impairments that we can learn from, so that we can, I know what my impairment's like, but I don't know how my impairment would affect anybody else, or different impairments. So we only employ, and we've been accused, by non-disabled people, of course, of discriminating against non-disabled people. And, my answer is, when I run out of talented disabled people, I might consider employing non-disabled people. But
you've got
yeah.
law on your side.
Sorry?
You've got employment law on your side.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
People don't understand about employment law.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you can actually advertise jobs specifically for the particular interest group or whatever, but you have to go to Secretary of State, but you have to give a very good reason why it needs
and
to
we
be
could
such.
defend that very, very easily. We'd have a really good defence about why. But yeah, I think with the disability charities, I mean with any charity, but particularly with disability charities, they really should be looking at senior management teams, not just the CEO, but the COO and, all the other senior leadership people having lived experience, because, how do you know if you haven't got lived experience? It doesn't mean they're not motivated. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be enabling non-disabled people to support and help what we do, but we need to be leading it. It's a bit like Black Lives Matter needs to be led by Black people, and women's groups need to be led by women. It doesn't mean that you exclude men, or that you exclude white people, or that you exclude non-disabled people. They are very important allies, because often those people are in positions of power and we need them to be on our side, but it should be led by whatever the interest group is itself, definitely.
Will you be pushing maybe not the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. Would you be pushing for companies to be employing more Black disabled people?
Yes, definitely. One of the things that one of the highlights of the last few years for me was that we worked with a company called Applied, and they did some research to find out which of the specialist job boards, not the mainstream ones like Jobs for Us or whoever, which of the specialist job boards were the best at attracting BAME candidates and women candidates, and we came second, which is pretty good when you think we weren't actually deliberately targeting those groups, but we came second in terms of BAME disabled candidates. And actually, when we went back and looked at it, it's because we're a very diverse organisation. So we have 40% of our employees are from BAME communities. We're very spread in terms, there's only 12 of us, so there's not a huge amount of us. But in terms of age, we spread from 19 to 70 something. In terms of gender, it's slightly top heavy on women. I think it's 7 to 5 women. But I think if you have a diverse team like that, you almost automatically are inclusive of the other groups, not just the group that you're focusing on. So although our primary target, if that's for want of a better word, is disability, we're very conscious that disability comes not just in forms of lots of different impairments, but it absolutely doesn't discriminate in terms of ethnic background or age or gender or sexual orientation or any of the others. And we need to make sure that we're there for all disabled people, not just the ones that look like us or share our impairment. And I think we've a long way to go, like all organisations have, but the fact that we have, and it's a very feisty group of people. It's, I'm pleased to say, our team meetings can be quite interesting because, disabled people have different views on things, don't they? And it's good to have voices from, different people being heard, just within our small organisation, and then we can share that with the organisations. We like to think we're a bit of a role model, not that we've got it right, but that we're trying to get it right and not exclude anybody, and that we're not just, we're disability, so all the other characteristics don't matter. They matter just as much. But we're focused on disabled people with all those characteristics.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Some great conversations going on there. Lots of really important viewpoints to consider.
We could talk for hours, Zai, actually. I bet we'd have a lot to talk about.
Sorry?
I bet we could talk for hours.
Well, I'm happy for you to have my details. And,
that would be great. I was in social work a while ago as well, so that would be great to compare notes.
Yeah, I'd really love to, because I mean, I'm at the latter end of kind of employment and stuff like that, but you have to have people. To have the good conversations to make change, you have to have people in the room.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Are you working now, I don't know. Sorry for talking.
I'm not at the moment, but I need to get back in the work market. So, but I'd happily just on policy and stuff like that.
Rita, could you introduce us by email afterwards? Would that be possible?
Yeah. Sorry. Do you have Lady Marie's email address? Because she's
I do.
lovely.
Are you able to just give me so we can communicate
Or-
direct without going through?
Perhaps, can you use the chat function here to
Yeah,
put your
I'll
email
try.
address?
Let me give, if I put, rather than you disclosing yours, let me put my email address in here, and then
Brilliant.
anyone who wants to contact me can do so.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everybody.
No, but it's great, you know, obviously if there's things you can carry on talking about after this. There you go. So can you see that there?
Yeah, I just yeah, yeah, cool.
So if anybody wants to contact me afterwards, please do so. This is my favourite subject, obviously. Well, this is my granddaughter.
Oh, brilliant. So did anybody else have any questions that they wanted to ask? No? Brilliant. Fab. Well,
I just sort of ask people, if you know of disabled people who are looking for work, could you just let them know that Evenbreak exists? Because we can't help them if they don't know we exist. And you know, what we do know about our employers is they haven't got everything right yet, but they are actively reaching out to try and attract more disabled candidates. So you know, it's probably a safer bet than other job boards. So just let them know that we exist.
yeah, I know, absolutely, definitely, we'll be doing that going forward. And it might even be great to have perhaps like a column in an upcoming issue of Forward, again, it's just as like a reminder.
Yeah, I'm very happy to write about what we do, and
yeah, just do like perhaps a reflective piece, as they given the current environment, like to encourage people, don't let that put you off.
Yeah,
you know, and talk about some of the things like framing yourself.
We're still premium candidates.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. So I'll email you separately about that, Jane.
No problem.
Okay, takes. So is everybody ready for a quick 5-minute quiz? It's only 12 questions. Coming from me, it probably won't be as hard as Lady Marie's.
Oh God, they're dreadful.
Okay, so Karen's kindly doing the IT whilst I'll read them out. So, number 1, sport.
And how does it work? How do we answer?
So, what would people prefer? Would people prefer to just shout out the answer when they know it, or for me to reveal the answers at the end of each round? Does no one have a preference?
How do you normally do it?
We normally do it, that we write it down and then at the end.
Okay.
Well, yeah, if you write them all down then, and we'll do, that'd be a bit easier actually, because then all the answers are on the final slide. So we'll do it that way.
Prize for the one who gets the least. Asking for a friend.
Yeah, that's what we're all competing at, is having the least. Could you please shut the front door?
Okay, fab. So, number 1. So, at the opening ceremony of the Olympics, which country enters the stadium first during the Parade of Nations? Okay, so I'll move on to number 2. Got question number 2, Karen. So, which horse won the 2019 Grand National to become the first horse since Red Rum to win the race back-to-back? Okay, down to number 3. So Wimbledon was cancelled this year for the first time in how many years? And then the last sports question is, what sport was played at Horse Guards Parade when London hosted the summer 2012 Summer Olympic Games? Would anyone like any more time on the sports questions? Are they all okay? No? Okay. Music. Number 1. So what do Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse all have in common? Number 2. What is the biggest selling album of all time in the UK? Number 3. Jimmy Nicole was a member of which world-changing pop group, albeit for just 13 days? And number 4. Who was the first female artist to achieve a UK #1 with a self-written song? And if you know the song title as well. Okay. So in the last round, there's only 3, is geography, my worst subject. Which South American country shares a land border with the most other countries? With most other countries. With most other countries. It's not the best English. Number 2. Which mountain range separates France from Spain? Number 3. In which city would you find the Taj Mahal? Last question. The Southern Alps are a mountain range which run along the centre of which Pacific island nation? Okay, so are we ready for the answers? Yeah. Oh.
Do you want me to show them, Breed, or do you want to read them out and people can shout out?
Well, perhaps if you go through, because I've just realised because you've shared the screen, I've lost my desktop.
Oh, shall I put them up then?
So if you just go on to the next slide, they should pop up one by one. So number sport, the answer, Greece.
Yeah.
The opening country. It was Tiger Roll who won the 2019 Grand National. Number 3, 75 years the Wimbledon's been going for. So yeah, first time it's been cancelled for 75 years. And number 4, beach volleyball was played at Horses Guard Parade. So in terms of music, question 1, the answer is that sadly all of those musicians died at the age of 27. So referred to as the 27 Club. Number 2, it was Queen with the greatest hits. Number 3 was the Beatles. I'd never heard of Jimmy Nicol before, so
Yeah.
13 days. I bet he regrets that one. Number 4, it was Kate Bush and the songs Wuthering Heights.
You get an extra point if we get both.
Oh yeah.
I'm having to grasp for every point I can get.
Oh, well done for getting that one. And then geography. So the first question, it's Brazil shares the most land borders with other countries in South America. Number 2, it's the Pyrenees, which is the mountain range separating France from Spain. Number 3 is Agra, is where you will find the Taj Mahal. And then last but not least, the Southern Alps is a mountain range in New Zealand. So how did that compare with Lady Marie's quiz?
I think I get the booby prize.
I like your quiz is much better, Breda.
Yay!
It's harder than that.
The only thing, the main thing I found that was different is that Martin didn't get told not to cheat. Lady Marie always tells him not to cheat. So I hope you had a good cheat today, Martin.
The one on music, I want to add something to that, because they all died of drug overdoses. And
Oh, really?
yeah, and that's what I put down.
Ah.
I'm not sure Amy Winehouse did.
Didn't she? I thought it was drug alcohol overdose.
Might have been.
I may be wrong.
Not, but, yeah, okay.
Oh, I'm happy to get 0.
Yeah. Oh, well, either way, they all certainly had a drug problem at one time or another.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely.
Well, I got 5.
Oh, I got 5.
Well
Oh,
done.
there you are.
You don't
We're
have
connected. We're connected.
And can I just say my claim to fame is that when I was having one of my many spinal surgeries, Amy was in the hospital at the same time on rehab.
Who was that, sorry?
Amy Winehouse.
Really?
Oh, really?
On rehab, and all the photographers were outside, which is why she was on the spinal floor, not the druggy floor. And she was charming all the nurses who all thought she was amazing. And she said, I really want to go to my own gym. Can I just go out one night for my own gym? I promise I'll be good. So they let her. And the inevitable happened. So yeah, just that's my claim to fame. And she was phoning, what was the husband called? I can't remember. She was Blake. She was phoning Blake at 3 in outside my ward, very loudly. Sorry, I think she was a brilliant singer, but
Oh, yeah, it's very sad. She's very, very troubled.
yeah.
Yeah, if you say brilliant singer though, what she could have gone on to have done.
And I'd like to thank you for having a really interesting session today.
Oh, thank you. As I say, I mean,
Very interesting.
well, Jane's written a couple of times the Safer Forward before, and I thought given what's going on at the moment in the UK and beyond, it's like really quite poignant to have this discussion, and it's great, you know, that you've all been able to chip in and have these conversations today. So thanks to both of you. It's been really, really interesting for me to sit and listen, you know, to get both of your viewpoints on the subject. So thank you for taking part. And
It's one of the best sessions we've had, I think.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for the feedback. It's really, really good to hear. Fab. Well, we've gone slightly over, but I think for me that's gone really quickly. Yes, so obviously you can get in touch with Jane.
Yeah, I will do.
And then Jane, I'll follow up with you as well about doing another piece in forward. That'd be really, really good. So thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Take care everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Breda. Bye.
Take care.